This might be the slowest time of the year in the Notre Dame football news cycle, but it could end up being one of the most important months for the 2026 season. I'll explain why coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak, Notre Dame alum and Fox Sports producer, and I am thrilled to have you here with me on Tuesday, February 17th, and thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. If you are watching along on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, hit that follow button so you don't miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive in every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for your patience. I was away for over a week last week on a work trip. Then I went straight from there to Mexico City for my good friend's wedding. Shout out to Jeff and Izzy Melsheimer, by the way. Beautiful ceremony, incredible weekend. Saw a ton of Notre Dame people, so it was a great time. That was amazing. But now I'm back in LA. I'm back in my little home studio, and I am ready to roll. This is a really interesting time for Notre Dame football. It's a slow news week, maybe even slow news month. But beneath the surface, this is one of the most important stretches of the entire offseason. We're going to talk about why winter workouts matter more than you think and how what's going on inside the Goog right now could end up defining the 2026 season. Then we're going to dive into two new staff hires, not necessarily headline-grabbing moves, but if you understand how Marcus Freeman is building this program, you know these are names to know. I'll explain why and connect it to the coaching pipeline that has already produced some big-time coaches out of Notre Dame. And then we're going to close things out with the basketball update as the Notre Dame men's basketball team finally snapped their losing skid. And while this season isn't going anywhere, next year is going to be massive for Micah Shrewsberry. But I want to start with an admission, okay? This is probably one of the toughest times of the year to do a daily Notre Dame football podcast. I'm coming up on 3 years with Locked On, and this is always one of the most challenging months on the calendar. There are certainly things to talk about. We're going to have a lot of fun conversations on this show, but it's just a really slow time of the year on the college football calendar. There's just no way around it. From a content standpoint, that's not ideal. I mean, the transfer portal window is closed. There's not another spring one like we've had in the past. We're still about a month away from the start of spring practice, which will be our first real look at the 2026 Notre Dame football team. And even then, we won't truly see this team in its fullest form until training camp opens up at the end of summer when everyone is back and the competition really ramps up. Last year at this time, we were just over 3 weeks removed from the end of the football season. Now we're over 2 months since Notre Dame last played a football game. That's really hard to believe. 2 months. Last year at this time, Notre Dame was looking for a defensive coordinator to replace Al Golden, and we are still sort of reeling from that loss to Ohio State in the national championship. So this was always going to feel like the longest offseason ever, especially with the way last year ended. We had all this hope and anticipation for another deep run in the college football playoff, but then on one fateful Sunday in early December, it just stopped. And now we're sitting here in mid-February just waiting for spring ball. I hesitate to say the coaching carousel is completely closed because in this sport, you never really know. I made the joke either last week or a couple weeks ago that I'm not going to say the coaching staff is officially set until they all take the field for training camp. But at this point, it does feel like Notre Dame staff is set at all major positions. John Bryce from Football Scoop reported recently that Lauren Lando, the director of football performance at Notre Dame, intends to stay with the Irish despite interest from the Raiders and the Cardinals. And then you've got Marty Biaggi, the special teams coordinator. It appears that he is likely to stay as well despite interest from other college programs and NFL teams. So knock on wood, it seems like Notre Dame is set at all the major positions. There are a couple analyst additions that we'll get to in segment 2. But in terms of coordinators, position coaches, the major decision makers, it does feel like the staff is in a good place. The one thing we have to look forward to in the short term is that we're going to meet a lot of the new faces starting on Wednesday. Over the next 3 weeks, Notre Dame is expected to make the new coaches, transfer portal additions, and the early enrollees available to the media. So we're going to get some quotes and some insight into how this team is shaping up and the stories about how those guys ended up at Notre Dame. But the real work is happening right now. And it's happening behind the scenes. Every player on this team is in the middle of winter workouts, or at least the guys who are on campus, right? There's still a couple of incoming freshmen who will not join the team until the summer, like five-star tight end Ian Premer, and then you've got DJ McKinney, who's finishing up his graduation at Colorado. But for the guys on campus, this is by far one of the most grueling stretches on the entire calendar. I'll never forget when I first really understood just how important this time of year is. So let's go back to January of 2017. I was a junior at Notre Dame, and I was an FTT major, which stands for Film, Television, and Theater major, which did have the reputation of being the quote-unquote athlete major. I was not an athlete, as you know. At least, not in college. Played in high school, no big deal. There were challenging classes and really smart people in the FTT major, no doubt about that, but nobody was going to confuse my coursework with organic chemistry or quantum mechanics. And yes, there were a lot of athletes in my classes. But at this particular time, January 2017, Notre Dame was coming off the 4-8 disaster in 2016. It was one of the most disappointing seasons in program history. Brian Kelly was essentially forced to clean house. He made major staff changes, and one of those decisions was hiring Matt Balis as the new strength and conditioning coach. Balis had spent the previous 3 seasons at UConn, which is not exactly a football powerhouse, so there was real uncertainty about the hire. Like, is this the guy who's going to fix the culture? Is this the guy who's going to turn things around in that locker room? So I remember talking to my friend Sam Bush, a former Notre Dame offensive lineman, before a class very early on in the spring semester. It might have even been syllabus week, the first week after winter break. He told me that they had their first workout in a couple days from then, very early in the morning. Fast forward 2 days later, I see Sam and a couple other guys from the team show up to that same class in the morning. And these dudes could barely walk. They could barely move. And I'm not exaggerating. They were moving around like 80-year-old men. And Sam looks at me and goes, dude, and just shakes his head. That's all he could get out. And I knew exactly what he meant. Balis had just put them through something completely different. Workouts unlike anything that they had experienced up to that point. And those workouts were brutal. They sucked. They were painful. But they changed the program. From that point on, Notre Dame has gone 86-21. They've made the playoff 3 times. They made 1 appearance in the national championship back in 2024. They became one of the most consistent programs in the entire country. And despite coaching changes, even at the strength and conditioning coach positions, right? Because Matt Balis left the program, and then Lauren Lando was hired by Marcus Freeman to replace him. He's done a good job. Notre Dame has obviously experienced roster turnover since 2016, and they've experienced a whole lot of other changes within and around the program. But yet the culture in that locker room has stayed intact and has actually elevated to new heights under Marcus Freeman and under the leadership of Lauren Lando. That foundation was built in the winter, and it continues today. That is what is happening right now. For us on the outside, we don't get to really see it. The most insight we'll get into this team in their winter workouts is 30-second clips or the occasional pictures from the Notre Dame social media accounts, and they post them sporadically, right? There's no scoreboard. There are no highlights, but this is when the team is truly being built. This is when leadership develops. This is when younger players figure out whether they're ready and what it's going to take to get there. This is when transfers have to prove that they belong. This is when veterans separate themselves and move up on the depth chart. In modern college football, championships are won in the offseason. They're won when you hire the right coaches. They're won when you attack the transfer portal strategically. And they are won when you recruit at a high level. But the real hard work is done in the weight room and on the turf field, inside the Goog and at the Irish Athletic Complex, and eventually inside the brand new Shields Family Hall, which is set to open up later this summer. They are won during times like these when really nobody is watching. Lauren Lando is widely regarded as one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the country. There's a reason there were so many NFL teams who were interested in his services, and there are plenty of other college programs out there, even at the very top, who would love to have Lauren Lando lead their strength and conditioning program. The fact that he intends to stay at Notre Dame says a lot about where this program is right now, and Marcus Freeman has emphasized culture from the day that he got here, and the strength program is a huge part of that. So yeah, there's not a lot of headline news for us to talk about these days, but this is, without a doubt, one of the most important stretches of the entire calendar for the Notre Dame football team. Because if Notre Dame achieves everything that we hope they will in 2026, the work, that those players are putting in right now is going to be a major reason why. This is the invisible part of the offseason, but it's one of the most important to winning championships. So, winter workouts are building the foundation, but culture isn't just built in the weight room, it is built in the coaching offices as well. And Notre Dame quietly added 2 names this weekend that could matter more than you think a little bit down the road. That's next. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward for those who believe there's more to the score than what's on the screen. When I think about what that really means, I think about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. 4 years in, and what stands out isn't just the wins, it's the way that he has built this program. The culture, the accountability, the way players talk about preparation and trust in one another. It's the work that happens long before kickoff, in meetings, in practice, in winter workouts like we're talking about today. That is how standards are set every single day. That's what moves a program forward, not just the final score, but everything that leads up to it. It reminds us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court or off the field, dialing in on every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can your pick cash, but it could also send you to the NBA Finals. So before the season, I picked the Denver Nuggets to win the NBA Finals. And even though the Oklahoma City Thunder have looked terrific this year yet again, I'm sticking with the Denver Nuggets. They are plus 550 right now on FanDuel. If they can somehow get by the Thunder in the Western Conference, they'll be heavily favored in the finals no matter who they face from the East, even if it's my Cleveland Cavaliers. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. Today, we're breaking down a few things that are happening behind the scenes that I think are going to matter in a big way long term. But before we get back to that, I wanted to remind you that you can get this show, Locked On Irish, ad-free with the Everydayer Club. Plus, you'll get access to the members-only Discord channel. Check it out at lockedonirish.supercast.com. Okay, so over the weekend, Notre Dame added 2 new assistants to the coaching staff. Chase Jones on the defensive side of the ball and Shaun Shivers on the offensive side. These are not splashy hires. There's a good chance that you probably haven't even heard of either of the people that I just mentioned. These are not moves that are going to change anyone's expectations for the team this year or probably even next year. So let's just get that out of the way off the top. But if you have followed Notre Dame closely over the last few years, you know that these are the types of names you should keep in the back of your mind. Just store that for later, because we have seen this program develop analysts and graduate assistants into high-level coaches, and they've done it in a relatively short amount of time. The best example of that is Chris O'Leary. O'Leary was a graduate assistant at Notre Dame for 3 seasons from 2018 through 2020, 3 highly successful seasons, right? 2 undefeated regular seasons, 2 college football playoff berths. And he was in the building bright and early every single day, grinding as hard as anyone else on the staff. And in 2021, he was promoted to become the safeties coach. He coached that room for 3 years. He was also very helpful in the development of Kyle Hamilton. Like, he credits Chris O'Leary quite a bit and did that a lot when he was a student at Notre Dame and then when he was going through the draft process. And then O'Leary left for the NFL, and he spent 1 season as the safeties coach for the Los Angeles Chargers. After that, he became the defensive coordinator at Western Michigan for just 1 season. And now Chris O'Leary is the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. Just think about that trajectory for a second. He went from being a GA in 2020 at Notre Dame to the defensive coordinator of an NFL team, an NFL playoff team for that matter, led by Jim Harbaugh, one of the best football coaches at any level, as much as that pains me to say because he's a Michigan guy. But he did that, O'Leary did, in 5 seasons. That's incredible. And it doesn't happen by accident. That happens because Notre Dame was able to identify sharp football minds early. Then you develop them internally, and then, when opportunities arise, they're ready. Max Bulla is another great example. In 2023, Bulla was technically a GA under Al Golden, but anyone paying attention knew that he was heavily involved with the linebackers and basically acted as their position coach. I'm pretty sure Max Bullough said as much once he was promoted to the full-time linebackers coach once O'Leary left for the NFL and then a full-time job on the staff opened up. Now, Max Bullough is the co-defensive coordinator at Michigan State, his alma mater, a Big Ten team who admittedly has been down in recent years, but that's still a big promotion for Max Bullough considering he's still a young coach. Max Bullough's protege, Trey Reeder, is only 23 years old, I believe, but he is crucial to the Notre Dame coaching staff, especially now after all the turnover on that side of the ball. Pete Sampson of The Athletic did a great profile on Reeder last week that really demonstrates his impact, so I'd encourage you to go check that out if you're not familiar with Trey Reeder either. Nick Sebastian is another name on the Notre Dame coaching staff. He is the current assistant defensive line coach, technically another analyst, and Notre Dame has worked hard to keep him because of how valuable he is to that room. So, when Notre Dame hires young assistants in these types of roles, you don't just gloss over it. You pay attention. Okay, so let's start on the defensive side. John Bryce was the first to report that Chase Jones is joining Marcus Freeman's staff after spending the last 2 seasons as a graduate assistant at Wake Forest. Jones is a former linebacker for the Demon Deacons. He was a 2-time captain, played in 41 games, and racked up over 200 career tackles, including double-digit tackles for loss. He was also a 2-time academic All-ACC selection, and he holds a degree in finance and a master's in financial technology and analytics. How financial technology and analytics transfers to the football field, I'm not sure. I'll admit that. But that profile sounds like a perfect fit at a place like Notre Dame. That tells you this is someone who's been a leader in a Power 5 locker room, someone who understands defensive football from a player's perspective too. He's young and he's already been on the GA track learning how to coach at the college level, and he is expected to replace Javon Codlin, who left to become the safeties coach at North Texas this offseason. Do I have like a big picture takeaway about what this means for the 2026 defense? No. These roles are behind the scenes, right? They're focused on film breakdowns, scouting reports, practice structure, player evals, and things that we don't see, but they matter a lot in the long run, especially to the other coaches on the staff, the primary decision makers, things like that. They really need quality assistants like this to get the most out of the room. But this is how you build depth on a staff. Freeman is obviously a defensive guy. And when you look at elite programs like the Georgias, the Ohio States, Alabama, they don't just have great coordinators, they have layers, especially Alabama during the prime of the Nick Saban era. Like they had a million assistants. I think they probably bent some rules in doing it, but they just built these great staffs year after year after year. So even when they experienced a ton of coaching turnover in the offseason, they just like reloaded every single offseason. And it wasn't just by hiring from other places, which they did so successfully. They built up analysts, quality control coaches, and just they had other young coaches that were being groomed. And then when it was their time to take over, they would excel in those roles. That's what this feels like, okay? And on the offensive side, there's another addition that's interesting in a slightly different way. Blue and Gold was first to report that Shaun Shivers is coming to Notre Dame, and he is expected to join the staff as an assistant wide receivers coach. Shivers was most recently at Florida State as an assistant running backs coach after spending last season as a GA at Eastern Michigan. Before that, he played football at Auburn and Indiana. He had a 5-year college career, and during that time, he rushed for more than 1,600 yards. He scored 14 touchdowns and averaged nearly 5 yards per carry, and he also caught 60 passes. His best season came at Indiana in 2022 when he rushed for nearly 600 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then he spent some time in the CFL before he made the transition over to coaching. But this is a little bit interesting because he's never coached wide receivers before. He's coached running backs. That was the position he played. He coached at the high school level at Chaminade Madonna, where he also served as head track coach. He's also worked as a GA, but this is going to be a positional shift. But based on that profile alone, you can tell that this guy can acclimate in a bunch of different roles in a bunch of different spots, and going from Auburn to Indiana, and this is Indiana pre-Curt Cignetti, obviously, like he has seen a lot. So I'm not too worried about how he's going to adjust to coaching wide receivers because he's an offensive skill player with SEC experience. I mean, hell, Jaywan Sider, one of the best running backs coaches in America, He played quarterback, okay? So you can learn and coach other positions and do it effectively, even if you didn't necessarily play that position during your playing days. So I'm not too worried about how he's going to adjust because he's an offensive skill player. He played in the SEC, he played in the Big Ten, and he's been around multiple systems, but he's still young and he has a lot of energy, which is really what you need with these analysts. You need guys who come in early, stay late, and just always have that juice. That's what Javon Codlin had when he was at Notre Dame. And with Shivers, Notre Dame clearly sees something in him that's going to translate to that wide receiver room. And, with so many scholarship wide receivers on the team now, I'm sure Mike Brown can use all the help that he can get. Again, this move, like the hire of Chase Jones, is not one that we're going to be talking about months from now. We're probably not going to be talking about it tomorrow or maybe ever again on this show. Who knows? Okay. But we're talking about it now because this is a move about building a staff that already has depth. It has internal development and it has young coaches who can grow into bigger roles if someone gets poached. Freeman talks constantly about alignment in the building, and part of alignment is bringing in people who fit the culture. And when you look at the two guys they just added and you look at their leadership background, their experience as players, their academic credibility, they seem like perfect fits on paper. Both of these hires check all the boxes. So, no, it's not headline news, but if you're a diehard Notre Dame fan, I would encourage you to file those names away because in 2 or 3 years, we might be talking about one of them the same way that we talked about Chris O'Leary. And if that happens, it won't really be all that surprising because we've seen it before. It'll just be the next example of Notre Dame developing its coaching pipeline the right way. All right. Now let's pivot to basketball because even in a tough season, as a matter of fact, a brutal season for the Notre Dame men's basketball program, you can't ignore a 37-point explosion. So did Micah Shrewsberry and the boys finally show a sign of good things to come? We're talking about it coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. And when you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, we're back here on Locked On Irish, and I want to close things out with a quick basketball update because the Notre Dame men's basketball team finally got back in the win column. After losing 5 straight and 1 win in their last 11 games, the Irish beat Georgia Tech 89-74 on Saturday. Let's be clear about something. Georgia Tech is horrible at basketball, and Notre Dame is not a good team either. This was not a signature win that's going to change the trajectory of the season, or at least I don't think it will. But I believe context is important here. Notre Dame is still without their best player on the team and Marcus Burton, who has been out for pretty much the entire year. And they were also without their star freshman, Jalen Harrelson, in this game too. The 2 most important pieces on this team were out. So I had very low hopes, to say the least. But fortunately, Cole Certa, man, he just went absolutely nuclear. He finished with a career-high 37 points on 7 made threes. He had 21 in the first half alone. He finished 7-11 from deep in 12 of 20 overall. The man was just unconscious. And with Burton and Harrelson out, somebody had to step up, and Cole Certa did more than that. He just carried the whole team. Braden Shrewsberry added 20 points. Logan Imes got the start, and he gave them 14 points and 9 rebounds, which were both career highs. So while this season is not going where anyone had hoped, okay, it's more than a disappointment. You have to give them credit for continuing to fight because they could have folded. They could have easily mailed it in after the long losing streak and started their applications for the transfer portal, but they didn't. Instead, they put up 89 points and they dominated the second half on the glass. They've now scored at least 79 points in 3 straight games, so offensively, they are showing signs of life. Big picture, this team is not going to make any noise in the postseason. This program still has a lot of issues that need to be addressed under Micah Shrewsberry, and they're not going to do any damage in March for the fourth year in a row. But here's the good news, okay? The road down the stretch for this team is easier. They have several games left against some of the worst teams in the ACC, even though they are one of the worst teams in the ACC, but they still have an opportunity to at least build some momentum going into next season. You can let young guys like Certa and Harrelson continue to develop, and maybe most importantly, you can help create an environment where your core guys like Certa and like Harrelson want to come back, because next year is absolutely crucial for Micah Shrewsberry. I do not expect him to get fired this offseason. I know some fans have suggested that. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to give him the fourth season unless things just really blow up here at the end of the season, but I don't think that's going to happen. Either way, though, Micah Shrewsberry is going to enter next season on the hot seat. The record is simply not good enough in year 3. The trajectory is not good enough either. In year 4 for Shrewsberry is going to matter a whole lot, but if he can keep his best players from transferring, if Marcus Burton comes back for another year, if Jalen Harrelson stays and Certa continues to grow, there's at least a path to turn things around, right? All you need is a path. It's not a guarantee, but there's a path, and it feels like a while since we've been able to say that. And that's really what these final games are about. Not this year, next year. Building something you can actually carry into 2026, 2027 with real expectations. And for a team that has been through just a brutal stretch, a glimmer of hope is really all you can ask for. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I really appreciate your patience. And if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow the show on your favorite podcast platform, like the video below if you're watching on YouTube, and leave a rating and review. I know I ask for it every show. I promise you it really helps us grow and reach more Notre Dame fans. And don't forget to drop your mailbag questions in the YouTube comments or send them to me on social media for Friday's mailbag episode. We missed it last week. It is going to return on Friday of this week. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning. I'll see you then.